Let's first start off by taking a look at how the Asian markets have started off, and it does not look a pretty picture. The indices are trading in the red as of now. The Hang Seng trading with cuts of around 0.7%, and the Taiwanese index also trading below the flat line. Losses also coming from both Japan as well as South Korea. The Japanese index, which is the Nikkei, is down almost 0.6%. The Kospi in South Korea too is trading with losses of well over 1% now, and it is the biggest underperformer across the Asia Pacific as of today's trade. And of course, seeing some profit booking from elevated levels, as Kospi has been an outperformer so far, gaining almost 35% on a year-to-date basis. Pull up the GIFT Nifty, and that will give you an idea of how our own markets are likely to start off. Well, no relief in sight as of now. The implied open suggesting a 42-point downtick after the 160 points that the Nifty lost in yesterday's trading session. Today, of course, happens to be the monthly expiry of all the Sensex related contracts, so we need to keep an eye out on that as well. But that's what we have on the global markets front, because the US markets were largely quiet all through yesterday's trade. And how would that affect our own markets? Well, our research team is joining in with the trade setup and of course the stocks that you need to keep an eye out for in today's trading session. But it was yet another day of losses for our own markets, and the Nifty, after seeing a bit of a recovery at the earlier part of the session, it was a very volatile session, but eventually ending close to the lows of the day. Now, the last three sessions, the index has declined almost 550 points from the highs that it made last week, which was around the 25,250 mark. And the other worrisome factor is that making lower lows on the daily charts. And what would not please the bulls, of course, the fact that we were almost touching the 24,858, almost 900 levels yesterday, but we closed near the lows of the day. Every recovery is getting sold into, and the Nifty Bank fell almost 450 points yesterday, despite both HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank ending higher. Two of the biggest index constituents ended higher, yet the index fell 450 points. Now, some of the triggers for today's session, of course, will be reacting to the IIP data that came out yesterday. Of course, it's a backdated data, so you can't see a much significant reaction to that. And there are more earnings reporting today. Earnings reactions also will come in from last evening. You need to keep an eye out for that. As I mentioned, it's the monthly expiry today for the Sensex contracts. And of course, any further pressure on the IT stocks that are already entering oversold territory, you keep an eye out for that. Now, earnings reactions, IndusInd Bank came out with numbers yesterday. Massgaon Dock came out with numbers yesterday. Both these stocks ended at the lowest point of the day before the results were announced. Also keep an eye out for earnings reactions on Vari Energies and GAIL. Now, some of the important levels to watch. Now, we closed below the June 16 low of 24,703. Now, that brings in the 13th June low, which is 24,473, which is where we reversed during the Israel-Iran war. So, important levels to track for the index. The GIFT Nifty for now is indicating a negative start for our own markets. But over to Upasna now, who would be listing out the stocks that you need to keep an eye out for today. Upasna, good morning.
Good morning. First up, let me start with IndusInd Bank. Overall numbers were above pole, but weakness continues in the asset quality of the bank. NII down about 14%. GNPA stood at 3.6 versus 3.1% sequentially. Next up is GAIL. Overall, the numbers were below our pole. The net profit down 8% net on a sequential basis. Revenue also down about 1% sequentially. NTPC Green Energy, overall good set of numbers. Net profit up 59% on a YoY basis, and revenue up about 18% on a YoY basis. Next up is Massgaon Dock on our radar. Net profitability in Q1 was impacted due to higher expenses, which is why net profit was down about 35% on a YoY basis, and revenue saw an uptick of nearly about 11% on a YoY basis. Next one on our radar is KC International. Net profit up 42% on a YoY basis. Revenue also up 11% on YoY basis. Torrent Pharma is the next up on our radar. Overall, if we look at the results, they are in line with estimates. Net profit up 20%, revenue up nearly about 11% on a YoY basis. Vari Energies is the next one on our counter. Overall good set of numbers, revenue up 30%, EBITDA margins expanded from 16.2% to 22.5% on a YoY basis. Adani Total Gas is the next one with net profit down nearly about 4% on a YoY basis, while the revenue saw an uptick of nearly about 20% on a YoY basis. And lastly, PNC Infra also on our radar as the company bags order worth 2,957 from Southeastern Coalfields Limited. So all in all, lot of results that we'll be watching out for today.
A lot of results and result reactions as well. Upasana, thank you for that. And lastly, Mangalam joins in with cues from the FNO space. Mangalam, good morning. Yet another lower close, but what's the FNO data indicating now?
Well, there is yet another lower close, and the interesting part is that during expiry week, it is usually the momentum that takes over, and momentum is definitely firmly with the bears this time around. Recoveries were sold into yesterday. There was a sharp sell-off that we saw on the frontline indices, and alongside that, you had advanced decline ratios as well. We ended at the widest difference between the red and the green lines, with almost 2,200 stocks declining for about 490 stocks which were advancing. At one point that number was 1,400, and then thereafter we saw a wide gap up out there as well. Volatility has spiked. Remember, it was at very low levels, pricing in complacency. Now it's gone back to above 12 levels, which is interesting. So over the last two trading sessions, the VIX has spiked by about 20%, and that makes option writers' life easier, but they're writing a lot more calls. Let's talk about the cash market flows. The FI sold about 6,000 crores in cash yesterday. The DIs went ahead and bought 6,700 crores. But in index futures, they've been continuously selling lock, stock and barrel. Yesterday as well, nearly 1,200 crore worth selling. The net exposure now stands at a short 1.65 lakh contracts and longs just at 15%. And that's not all. We've been talking about how there's been a lot of call selling yesterday as well. That continued. 61,000 short calls initiated versus just 22,000 short puts initiated. Over the last two trading sessions, there have been nearly 2.5 lakh calls that the FIs have written versus just about 80,000 puts that they've written. And the put call ratio, which was anyway lower at 0.7, has gone further lower to 0.64, telling you that at some point there is a bounce which is imminent, but immediate triggers are lacking. If you look at, the active options, 24,800 call writers, fairly active. What it's telling you is that the ceiling is coming down for the market. 24,700 call writers equally active as well. But at the lower level, we are seeing put writers active at 24,600 and 24,500. What does all of this mean in terms of a range? You're looking at some support come by around that 24,550 to 24,650 mark. Congestion as we cross the 24,800 to 24,850 mark, very close to yesterday's high. The 50-day moving average on the Nifty bank is extremely crucial to track, because it broke below that yesterday despite some of the heavyweights doing well. Can it cross past that? Once it does, only then can one look at even the Nifty and the other indices.
The one important bit that Mangalam highlighted, lack of positive triggers. That is what is keeping the markets under pressure currently as well. Mangalam, thank you for that update.